So today I'd like to talk about the election and what it means to planning. First of all, the election took me by surprise a bit, but perhaps just over to you, Derek. What does it mean for planning?
I think it probably means a number of things, and like you, it took me by surprise. But with hindsight, I think the government may have been preparing for an early election for longer than we may have appreciated. And in terms of planning, I think the Housing White Paper, published at the end of February, has set the agenda, certainly for the broader housing growth agenda. And I'm expecting that to be strongly reinforced in the Conservative Party's manifesto. And to be honest, I think that sets the path for everybody involved in planning for housing, probably over the next 5 to 10 years. And as I say, I'm fully expecting the Conservative Party manifesto to enshrine what's in the Housing White Paper and maybe take it a step further. Okay. And I suspect the other parties will broadly align themselves with that in the round.
Okay. So Housing White Paper, setting a clear direction of travel, would you agree, Mike?
Yes, qualified yes. I'd be very interested to see what the manifestos say, obviously. I'd be very interested to see how much additional emphasis is put upon the importance of cracking the housing problem. I'd be very interested to see whether the government and the Conservative Party actually continue to put that weight on non-ownership forms of tenure, which is, I think, crucial as a big part of the solution. My fear is, I suppose, that post-election we're going to be dominated by, well, the election's going to be dominated by Europe, and all legislative processes will be focused upon the consequences of leaving Europe, and I think that will downgrade the legislative path of really important bills, particularly around housing and planning. So that's my fear, be relegated in importance.
Okay. Jamie, you're nodding.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be hard to see anything else being talked about other than Europe and what that might mean and how the exit deal will look. Just to pick up on Mike's point there about legislation, the Housing Planning Act is in, and the neighbourhood planning bill just squeaked in as well before recess. So we do have the legislative framework in place. We're also starting to see a trickle of regulations coming through as well now. We've got the Brownfield Register stuff quite recently, permission in principle as well. So I think legislation is moving forward. I think the fact that most of the Housing White Paper proposals will be coming forward in the NPPF makes it slightly easier for government. There's not necessarily that parliamentary pressure. It's going to be policy-based changes. So that in itself should see those come forward relatively smoothly, but of course it's a consultation that's out, has actually just closed, and the new government will be picking up those responses and deciding how to take them forward. It is ultimately a consultation document. It's a heavyweight consultation document, but these are proposals, so we wait to see how they actually look in practice.
You'd agree with that then, Mike?
Well, I hope that that's what actually happens, but I just think that so much time and energy and intellectual effort will be put into Europe that we may find that there are delays. Okay. More immediately, though, my concerns are that as we approach the general election, some projects which are going forward in boroughs where there are marginal seats are hostage to fortune, and we may find that we'll have some local difficulties around particular schemes, which may mean that we seek to have them deferred or not scrutinised and subject to ambush prior to election.
Okay. Is it worth picking up on that point a little bit, the process issues that then go on, and thinking about things like Purdah in particular? I think there's a huge degree of misunderstanding in some quarters about what this actually means for planning decisions locally. Jamie, perhaps you could just expand on your thoughts on
you're
that.
absolutely right. Purdah can mean different things to different people. It should be a relatively clear set of guidelines, and there is civil service guidance on this, which was issued just prior to the general election. And the role of government is to govern, and that shouldn't be affected by elections. And the theory that Purdah effectively puts a moratorium on everything is taking, I think, far too far. It shouldn't be taken as literally as that. Some officers and some members possibly do interpret it as being a broad brush approach and essentially saying, well, we can't make controversial decisions. And controversy is one of the key words, actually. Purdah is meant to be, as I say, government functioning as it normally does. Planning decisions, individual planning decisions, shouldn't really be affected by it. Most planning decisions are controversial, schemes are controversial, but they're not changing policies or interpreting policies that are already there. So in terms of process, in terms of development management, it shouldn't be massively affected. I see Purdah as more of an issue around communications and possibly putting forward policies that the next government may have a different view on, and doing something to sort of prejudge the future direction of policy. And that takes us back, I guess, to the NPPF. Were changes to be made to the NPPF now, obviously it's not going to happen, but were that to happen, that's a clear issue in a Purdah context. So I think it's overstated, in a word.
Okay. What do you think about the impact on local decisions?
Well, I entirely agree with what Jamie's just said. Purdah, in one sense, is over-exaggerated by some commentators. It should not affect day-to-day decision-making in local government or national government. The process must go on. You cannot freeze time for 6 weeks whilst the politicians go through an election. And it concerns me, actually, that you see Purdah quoted as a reason why a decision cannot be taken. And when you drill down, actually, that decision could be taken because there are technical reasons to take the decision rather than political reasons.
Okay.
That works at a delegated level. It works less at committee level, where political influences will potentially direct a decision, often against officer recommendation.
Yes,
Okay.
you're absolutely right. That does occur, Michael.
Yeah. So a clear framework, perhaps, but sort of playing out quite differently on the ground. That's interesting. So we think there's probably a clear direction of travel. You've commented on the fact that with the Brexit, the whole sort of raft of activity that's going to happen around that might be a distraction and impact on planning and housing policy and legislation being progressed. What will good look like? Yeah, let's take ourselves through into Jean. I'll start with you.
What will good
Derek,
look like?
what does good look like?
Good, in my world, will be a period of stability.
Okay.
And with planning largely outside of the Brexit debate. Okay. And I genuinely think we are heading for a period of stability now in planning. As Jamie said, the legislative framework, particularly with the enactment of the Neighbourhood Planning Act a couple of weeks ago, is now in place.
Okay.
The Housing White Paper, Jamie was right, is actually technically a consultation document, but it's a direction of travel. And the government will respond to that if re-elected.
Okay.
So good means stable to me.
Good means stable. Mike?
Yes, I mean, bearing in mind the instability that surrounds us in wider terms, a period of stability in planning terms is going to be welcome. I think good would look like planning authorities that are given additional resources to be able to process applications in a timely and efficient way and making good decisions. I think good will look like actually bringing forward more housing, although I think we're going to be troubled by economic issues and problems. I think we're in for a bit of a dip economically, which is more likely to affect the delivery of housing. So I think some of the policy positions that have been established, particularly around, or are being established, particularly around affordable housing, will, for instance, the Mayor's suggested threshold, will be very difficult to deliver simply because the market won't allow it to happen.
Before we move on, so what does good look
Good looks like keeping going, developers having confidence to bring schemes forward. Good looks like a continuation of the more sophisticated approach to mixed-use development, continuation of the focus upon transport-led regeneration, and the continuation of infrastructure commitments, I think.
Okay. Stability, continuity. Jamie?
Trying to think of another word that says exactly the same thing, because I fully agree. We've had so many changes in recent times to the planning system, and I'm firmly of the view now that there are enough tools in the toolbox. I think we need to let planners plan and get on with doing what they're supposed to be doing. We don't need any more tools. They're all there. And actually, if you go one step further and you start introducing more things and reforming the system even more, you risk entirely undermining what we currently have. So I think almost a moratorium on planning reform I would like to see. I don't know if it's going to happen, but that's what I would like to see. I think, as Mike says, housing should still be the number one topic on the agenda. It won't necessarily be that way, given what else is going on, but housing should be the main focus, and the tools are there to deliver housing, subject, of course, to economic conditions. And I think just following that slightly further, the government's approach, whichever government we end up with, their approach to reforming developer contributions is central to that. Yeah. That is the one unknown at this stage. We pretty much know from the Housing White Paper what the areas of reform are going to look like. That is the only one that's up for grabs now. Whether we get something by the autumn budget, I don't know. Probably not now, given the uncertainty we have around the general election. But I think that could be absolutely critical in tackling what will be the biggest threat to housing delivery.
A strong and stable planning system.
A strong and stable planning system.
Can I say what very good would be?
What would very good be?
all of the above, plus some continued major announcements by government on infrastructure funding.
Okay.
I particularly welcomed the announcement on their preferred option for the Lower Thames Crossing recently, which is a major boost, particularly obviously to movement, but also the economy in South East England.
Okay.
And that should be taken forward across Britain.
So stability, continuity, and the continued focus on delivery.
Yeah.
There we are. Okay. Thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure.
Thank you.